Hi there, it's Anne with Art on the Creek. Thanks for coming today. We are in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, as always, and today I have a fun treat for you. I thought we could do a little bit of something tropical, which I don't usually do here in my dry, arid climate of Colorado. Let's paint a water lily together. Are you ready? Here we go. So even though this video will be a full-length tutorial on the water lily that I did when I did the Meeden review, and I'll put a card up here in the corner in case you want to go over there and see that review and swatching of this set that I have here, I'm going to put some links in the description for you where you can use the affiliate link, which will take you right to the Meeden store, and then I'll have another affiliate link in there where you can go right to this watercolor set. And a coupon also, so that will save you some money if you decide to go forward and get some of these. Now, I did since get a palette and put these in, and the paints, and I will show those to you. And I like them in the pans. I think they work just fine. I will say that I think the paints work the best on this particular paper. It's excellent paper. I do love it, and I have since found out that it is probably made the same thing rather as Bao Hong. That's a paper I've used before and I really enjoy. This particular one though is a great size, great price point. I really like it, and it's 100% cotton. So here's our reference photo right here, and there will be a link to that in the description as well. I'm just drawing this out. The only information that you really need to put in here is the water lily and just a couple of the leaves maybe, because in the photo you see that it's kind of hyper focused on the water lily, which is great because that's what we want. So what we're going to do is just kind of not worry about the background, and that's something that's really easy to do in watercolor. It's a lot of fun. In fact, it's one of the things I enjoy the most is those blurred backgrounds, because that's where you can really just have fun and let the paint mix and mingle and have a little party on its own. So we can do that here as well. In fact, if you wanted to, you could, after you get this water lily all drawn out, you could fill it in with masking fluid and then really go to town on the background and not worry about staying away from your water lily, because we do want to leave a little bit of white space on this so that we can get some nice highlights, because our background is going to be pretty dark and intense, and we want to be able to kind of have a spotlight on that water lily. In fact, there's a way that you can even make kind of sunshine or light coming through the mist by using a lift-off technique. If you're not familiar with that, I will go over that in a separate video, because I did not do that with this particular painting. But let me know if you'd like to learn how to do those rays of the sun when it's coming through the mist, and I can definitely show you how to do that. It's easier than you might think, and it's a whole lot of fun. So we'll just finish putting these petals on here. I will have a PDF line drawing. True confessions, I'm recording this voiceover after the fact, and I cannot remember if I took a photo of this one to make a PDF. So I can't guarantee that it will be exactly this drawing, but it will definitely be similar. I just did pause the voiceover here for just a quick second to check to see if I had a scan of this particular drawing that you're seeing right here, and I don't, but I will make it as close as possible, and that way you'll be able to have a line drawing that you can print out with those PDF drawings. You just want to print it out and then go over it with a Sharpie. Go over the lines that you want to use, and then you can trace that any way that you want. And the reason I suggest going over it with a Sharpie is because that'll make the lines that I have in my PDF, which are kind of faint, it will make them really easy to use. Another way that you can do it is to simply take your pencil or any kind of graphite and just fill the back of your printer paper with the PDF line drawing printed out on it. Just fill the back of it with graphite and then lay it on top of your watercolor. Try not to smudge or smear it too much. Lay it on top of your watercolor paper rather, and just go over the lines that you want on the front of that PDF, and that way that pressure will transfer that through. You can also use graphite tracing paper, whatever suits your fancy. So you see, I didn't put too many leaves in the background, just a few, and that's going to be just fine for us. We really don't need that many. Let's see here. I want to pick a few colors out. I've got a yellow, and let's see, what other colors do we need? That yellow, by the way, is a pale yellow, and I'm just using a palette here. I'll link to these as well. Now, this will be through an Amazon affiliate link. These palettes are actually not palettes. They are appetizer trays that I got from Amazon, and gosh, you can find anything like this at the dollar store, any kind of white ceramic platter. This was just convenient for me to buy it in 3 different sizes, because then I could have multiple palettes going all at once. And I really like that when I'm working in my studio. So, and then I'll just continue to use up these paints on these palettes for other paintings. In fact, if you see that one on the left there with all the blues and greens on it, it's so fun to just mix all of that up and come up with just some kind of random palette gray. And then what you can do is just use that in a background, and it's really a lot of fun. This pink that I'm putting down now is the rose. It's a PV19. I would say any kind of magenta. And you'll notice I'm going in with a very thin wash. This first layer, you're going to want it to be as light as possible. So we're just going to go over each leaf, and I'm working on leaves that are right next to one another of this lily, which is fine. You can do that, but you can also skip if you didn't want too much mixing and blending. Now, the good thing about these Meeden brushes is they really do help you control the amount of water you have on your brush. So you're not going to really run into that issue of having the paints bleed into one another on each lily petal. So for instance, if you're working on one and you want it to be a little darker than the other one and you didn't want that paint to bleed into it, you have a couple of options. You could just simply work on a different leaf altogether, a different petal, or you could just be real careful and try not to go beyond your line. So here I'm putting down the paint in a thicker consistency toward the center, and then I'm going in with just water and kind of brushing it around. And you'll see I've still got a little bit of that pink on my brush, so I'm able to deposit a very sheer layer of that pink throughout the lily, and I'm just kind of going around and filling it in. I'm using one of the round brushes. This brush set is really kind of nice. These points have, or excuse me, the round brushes have a really beautiful point to them. The filaments are probably nylon. I'm not entirely sure. They feel like nylon. They feel like definitely a very man-made filament. The only caution that I would tell you with these brushes is when you dip your brush in the water, the ferrule, that's the metal part that holds the filament onto the handle, that might end up with a drop of water on it. So just be aware of that if you're really trying to do something very tiny and you don't want any extra drops of water coming down on your paper, or if you just don't want any extra drops of water, period. Then what you're going to want to do is make sure that those droplets that are on the ferrule, you don't want those to really, hang around and drop off of the ferrule onto your work. So let's see, the blue that I'm using is the ultramarine blue. It's a really great color for making shadows. I can mix it with the magenta, or the rose they call it, as I'm doing now, and kind of get a nice purple going in there. Just straight on blue was a little bit too blue. So this time I really like it better when it's mixed with the purple. And this is where you might think, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've ruined my lily. You haven't. We're just not done yet. This is the part where the painting is going to go through a little bit of an ugly phase, because that purplish petal that's coming right out at us looks kind of shocking and out of place. But don't worry, we'll just put in more layers on the petals, and we'll go ahead and continue to make the values the way that we want them, and just continue to kind of play with this different levels of a mix of the ultramarine and the rose. I've got this portion sped up a little bit just so you can see kind of where you'll be headed when you do this, adding this next glaze, this next layer. You're just going to work with different varying combination percentages of that ultramarine and the rose, and fill in wherever you want it to be darkest. And then once that's done, now we're coming back in here at regular speed now, we're just going to go in with the water while this is still damp, and you're going to pull that pigment out to create the right shade of the petals that you want for your lily. So just kind of keep referring back and forth to your reference photo, to your painting, and just keep an eye on where those colors are the most intense or where they're the most in shadow. And that's where you're going to want to increase the amount of pigment that you put down. If it doesn't come out the way you want to at first, don't worry about it. It's all just practice and experimentation. And once you get the handle of how much pigment to use and how much water to use, and this might be a little bit different for some of you because you're using it right out of the tube. One way around that is to go ahead and buy a palette to go with these and fill the pans in the palette. Let it cure overnight at least, and then paint from there. And then you'll have a little bit more of a solid form to work from. And that might be a way to use watercolor that you're more familiar with. So don't make it hard on yourself. Don't worry if you've given yourself a challenge that you think is more than you can handle. I think that it's going to be okay. You're just going to have to play with those values and mixes in varying percentages of the ultramarine and the rose to just kind of see what works well for you. Now here on this palette of mixed greens, I want to say I've got some of the cerulean there. Now their cerulean looks a little more turquoise. If you wanted to add that to the three colors, you could. You wouldn't need to. I would just mix the ultramarine and the pale yellow in such a way that you create somewhat of a bluish green, some kind of a deep blue green. And if you want to make it really deep, you can add just a touch of that rose, and that will really help you to create that dark, rich value that is on these lilies, the leaves. So what I'm doing is I've waited for that lily to get pretty dry, right where the edge is. And this time I definitely don't want that green to leach into the pink of the leaves at all. If it does, don't sweat it. You can just blot it out. It's everything with watercolor. It's pretty difficult to get it to such a point where you can't fix it. Typically you can. Now, there are some pigments that are harder to lift off than others. And if you've never heard the term lifting off, what you want to do is just get your brush wet with clean water, blot it off on a paper towel, and then paint on what it is that you want to lift up so that you can loosen or agitate that pigment, and then go in with a clean paper towel or a clean rag and just blot that up. So there are a lot of ways that you can lift things off. That's just one, and you can use it to correct a mistake. I would not invest in a scrubber brush or an eradicator brush just yet if you are new to watercolor, because those things really do require a bit of a finesse and a delicate hand. So once you've had a few more miles behind your brush, then go ahead and try and experiment with that sort of thing in different ways to lift off, because it is good to have something in your arsenal where you can make a correction if you need to. So here I'm just varying the shade of green. Now I've got a lot of greens mixed in on my palette because this is actually the palette that I used to paint a parrot, a different painting. So I've got a lot of greens and blues and yellows mixed in over here. But if you're just going to stick with that primary palette of the rose, the pale yellow, and the ultramarine, which is pretty much a CMY palette when you're working with printing, the CMY is cyan, magenta, and yellow. So whatever combination you have of those will certainly work to do this lily. You'll see that what I'm doing is I'm going in with different values of those mixes, different percentages of blues and yellows in those mixes, and some of them do have just a little bit of magenta added to make them just a little bit darker. So let me zoom a little bit forward on these leaves and we'll see where we're going with that. This part is sped up, but I wanted you to see kind of how I'm working on these leaves that I want to be somewhat in focus. I have some darker, some lighter, and I'm going in with a little bit extra pigment and adding some shadows. Sometimes I'll add some veining like this. I'm just being very, very vague and just trying to suggest what these leaves might look like. I don't want to do anything that's going to take away from that center feature, which is our lily. That's the real star of the show here, and I really want to just make these leaves as subtle as possible. Now, if you want to, you can go in and you can make as much detail in this as you like, and it will be a beautiful painting. But for me, for my purposes, and the way I want to teach you how to do this, is to just really be able to focus on one thing and have it come to center front, have it be the center stage, the shining star of your painting, and then to make the rest of it kind of disappear into the background. So you notice the first thing I did was I put some water down there, and it wasn't even very clean. And that is okay, because what I'm doing is I'm just going to use this upper half of the painting to be the out of focus background portion. I'm putting in water, and then I'm just going on the palette anywhere I can find any greens or blues mixed together, and I'm just dropping them in. I'm not really even planning this. I'm just kind of making it variegated. And it looks like I'm using the same brush. I think I am. I'm using this, and these brushes don't really have traditional, round number 6, round number 8, Western naming that I'm accustomed to. They're named by their width. I would say that this one is kind of about a number 7, which is kind of, in between a 6 or an 8. The painting is rather smallish. It's not huge. It's I think this is about an 8 by 10. So you can go ahead and just use a regular brush. If you wanted to use a bigger brush for this part, you sure could. But I wanted to be able to control where I was putting these pigments and just really have a lot of ability to put in variance. And you can certainly do that with a stroke brush. You can use anything you want. The only thing that I think would give you a little bit of a struggle is if you went any smaller than a number 8. I think a number 6 would be too small to do this background part that I'm doing right now, but you can see how with that point, how easy it is to get in between the petals of the lily. And that really does make it easy on us. Now, one thing I want you to notice right here on these 2 top petals, I am leaving a bit of white space around those petals. And when we're done, I hope you can see it right now, that will create a natural highlight. It's a great sense of light bouncing off of that lily. And you can see once we have the background in, now our lily doesn't look so crazy out of place. It really shines. It really becomes the center focal point. And you can see on the background here where I'm putting in this this upper part up here that's just so out of focus and just really unplanned. I'm kind of sort of putting in a little bit of leaf shapes because you can in the photo. You can see that there are definitely leaves back there. I mean, I don't want to just make this completely random, because what I do want to do is pilot it a little bit so that you all can see, that any viewer rather can see that it is still leaves back there. They're just out of focus. So that's kind of what I'm trying to establish with this mix mélange that I'm doing in the back, where I usually will just drop pigment in at random on a completely wet surface. I'm going in with a little bit of detail here and just kind of guiding that pigment a little bit more carefully. But definitely the leaves on the front side of the lily, which would be the bottom of it, are the ones that I'm going to pay attention to the detail, which we can do now by adding some shadow. And with that, we're just using, now this is wet on dry, we're going underneath the petals of the lily, wherever there would be a shadow, leaf on top of leaf or petal on top of leaf. And we're just adding that little bit of a pigment line there. And then if we wanted to, we could come back in with some water and distribute that pigment just a little bit. And what that does is it'll soften that shadow. One thing to always notice when you are painting anything is that when you are working on a shadow, it's never just gray. It's never just black. It is always the color of whatever the shadow is on. And sometimes it's a little bit of that light gets bounced back, and it's the color of the item making the shadow. So if you look closely, for instance, let's say you have an orange on a white table. The shadow will be a little different shade of the white, but it might also contain just a little bit of that orange. So when you're working with shadows, really focus on looking at shadows with your everyday life. See what colors you see in those shadows. Try and remember that so that you can bring that into your paintings, because your shadows will have more life and they'll be more vibrant. And when you bring that light and shadow into a painting, that's what gives paintings life, joy, and movement. And it really makes for a much more dynamic painting, a lot more fun to look at. And that way you can really explore and experiment with your own style. And this lily is a really good one to practice doing that. Now, when you go in with your shadows, the other thing I want you to remember is that the most intense shadow is going to be right along the base of whatever it is that's making that shadow. And that's why it's such a good idea that when you put the pigment on to make a shadow, you do a very thin line along what it is that's making the shadow. And then, like I said, you can come back with clear water if you want to and pull that pigment out, and then that will soften the edge of your shadow. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just working on some very graphic style of leaf veins, just kind of trying to underscore that element that yes, these are leaves. And they are definitely pretty large, pretty significant leaves that the lily is sitting on. So that will help the viewer to know that, oh, this is a lily on a lily pad. I get that. I've seen that before in my life. And if the viewer has never seen it before in their life, then they will understand that this flower lives on very dense leaves. So it's a lot that we can do as artists to convey whatever it is we're trying to convey without spending the time and the effort to be a botanical illustrator. And now I will tell you, botanical illustrators in my book are probably the most incredible artists. I mean, the level of detail, not only the observation skills, but the detail that gets translated on the page. I am fascinated with that ability. I don't have it. I don't have that ability. So my work is not going to look like that. My work is about reflecting a moment that I see in nature, something that makes me happy because painting brings me joy. And, you know, not to say that botanical illustrators don't get joy out of their paintings, because I certainly do. What I want to impart to you guys is the ability to create something that's going to make you happy, that's going to help you remember a moment, and that is relatively easy to do, that doesn't take multiple days, multiple sessions to complete. This entire video is going to be under 30 minutes. So this painting is something you could easily do, you know, when you're waiting for something to cook, or if you have a break over while you're working, maybe you work from home and you just want to take a break from your meetings for a while, and you can go over to your painting area and just get a quick painting done. And if you don't work from home and you're exhausted when you come home, because I've been there, I had that job, you know, crashing in front of the TV is great some days, and that's just what you need. But, you know, some days, maybe take a walk. Maybe spend some time with your thoughts. Maybe just ignore the TV for a while, set your phone down, set up a time for just yourself, because I think that art can really help take away stress. It can help calm us. And as long as you've got good lighting in the evening, that's something that gets really more and more important as you get older. But if you've got some good lighting in the evening, you can enjoy yourself and you can really have fun creating, relaxing. And that's really what I hope all of these lessons on my channel are for you. Fun, relaxing, and just a great way to spend your time. Well, now we want to switch to a smaller brush. So if you have a number 4 round or a number 6 tapered round, you just need something with a really nice point here that can hold a fair amount of paint. And I think I actually may have fibbed a little bit. We're going to use a little bit of a warm red. You can use in this set, you can use the crimson red. I think that would be a really nice one. And if you don't have that, then a cadmium red would work just fine. Just make sure it's not too strong. And we're going to go in and add just a touch of red around that petal, because we want to bring out some of the vibrancy to this flower. Now, if we were to continue to go in with the rose and the ultramarine, I mean, it would be fine, but we would run the risk of overworking our painting. And that's something we want to be very careful with. We don't want to go in there and use too many layers and have it overworked. And then in the center, we're just going to go in real quick with that pale yellow to create all of the middle parts of the lily. And now we can use our heat tool to remove that tape. And remember to use a low tack tape. You can just use painter's tape from the hardware store, or washi tape, or this is drafting tape actually. And now we're going to make sure it's completely dry. If you don't have a heat tool, every time you see me use a heat tool here in this painting, just let your painting dry naturally. You can use a blow dryer, just make sure you do that on the lowest setting. So there you go, my friends. There is your water lily, and I hope that everything works out well for you on this painting. I hope it was relaxing. I hope you had so much fun doing this. And remember, if you want to, you can take a look at this Meeden watercolor kit. I certainly had fun using it. I highly recommend this particular paper with the Meeden paints, because I have used them on some other papers and they don't quite act the same, but this is really good paper, and every paint that I've used on it has been a success. So if you wanted to get in at a really affordable set, I do recommend this one, and I've got that affiliate link and a coupon for you down below. Thanks so much for tuning in today, you guys. I hope you have fun painting this week. Enjoy making your water lily. If you enjoy content like this, I appreciate it so much. Please consider giving this video a like, or leaving a comment, or better yet, sharing it with one of your friends, because that really does help my channel. Another way you can help my channel and continue to see content like this is to become a member. Just look at the bottom of this video for the button that says join, and then if you click on that, it will take you all the way through the process. You will be able to see what the membership levels are and decide if that's right for you. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you next time on Art on the Creek.